Ted Kaczynski, the man who would become the infamous Unabomber, began life as a seemingly ordinary child. Born into a Polish-American family, Ted was the first of two sons. His parents, Wanda and Theodore Kaczynski, were hard-working individuals who valued education and instilled a love for learning in their children from a young age. Born in 1942 in Chicago, he displayed an early aptitude for learning. From a very young age, Ted showed signs of exceptional intelligence. His parents noticed his ability to solve complex problems and his keen interest in reading, even before he started school. Ted excelled in school, particularly in mathematics. His teachers were often amazed by his ability to grasp advanced concepts quickly and his knack for solving difficult problems with ease. He was frequently ahead of his classmates, which sometimes made him feel isolated. He was a quiet, introverted boy, preferring books and puzzles to social interaction. While other children played outside, Ted could often be found engrossed in a book or working on intricate puzzles. His solitary nature was evident early on, and he seemed content in his own company. At age 16, Kaczynski entered Harvard University on a scholarship. This was a remarkable achievement for someone so young, and it was a testament to his intellectual capabilities. Harvard was a world away from his modest upbringing, and it presented both opportunities and challenges. This remarkable achievement hinted at a bright future. His family and teachers had high hopes for him, believing that he would go on to make significant contributions to society. The scholarship was a recognition of his hard work and dedication to his studies. However, his time at Harvard was marked by both academic success and growing isolation. Despite his brilliance, Ted found it difficult to connect with his peers. The competitive and often cutthroat environment of Harvard only exacerbated his feelings of alienation. He struggled to connect with his peers, retreating further into himself. The social pressures and the intense academic environment took a toll on him. He spent most of his time alone, either studying or contemplating his thoughts. This social detachment would become a defining characteristic throughout his life. Ted's inability to form meaningful relationships and his preference for solitude were traits that followed him into adulthood. These early experiences at Harvard were a precursor to the isolation that would later define his life. Even as a young man, Kaczynski exhibited a complex mix of brilliance and social awkwardness. His intellectual prowess was undeniable, but it came at the cost of his social skills. He often found himself at odds with the world around him, unable to fit in. He possessed a powerful intellect, yet seemed ill-equipped to navigate the complexities of human relationships. This dichotomy between his mental capabilities and his social ineptitude created an internal conflict that he struggled with throughout his life. This internal conflict would ultimately set him on a dark and destructive path. The seeds of his future actions were sown during these formative years, as he grappled with his identity and his place in the world. The combination of his intellectual brilliance and social isolation created a perfect storm that would later manifest in his infamous actions as the Unabomber. Kaczynski's academic prowess continued to flourish at Harvard. He was a prodigy, entering the prestigious university at the tender age of 16. His intellectual capabilities were evident to all who encountered him. Professors and peers alike were astounded by his brilliance, particularly in the field of mathematics. He was not just a student, he was a phenomenon, a young mind that seemed to grasp complex concepts with an ease that was almost unsettling. And beyond, he earned his PhD in mathematics from the University of Michigan, where his dissertation on boundary functions was so advanced that it left a lasting impression on the academic community. His work was groundbreaking, pushing the boundaries of what was known and understood in the field. He was awarded multiple accolades for his contributions, and his future in academia seemed not just promising, but assured, cementing his reputation as a brilliant mathematician. His peers and mentors saw him as a rising star, someone who would undoubtedly make significant contributions to the world of mathematics. His research was published in esteemed journals, and he was invited to speak at conferences around the world. The academic world was his oyster, and he had the potential to become one of the leading mathematicians of his generation. His work was highly regarded, and he seemed destined for a successful career in academia. He was offered a teaching position at the University of California, Berkeley, one of the most prestigious institutions in the world. It was a dream come true for any academic, a chance to shape young minds and contribute to the advancement of knowledge. But for Kaczynski, it was the beginning of a profound internal struggle. However, Kaczynski grew increasingly disillusioned with university life. The very environment that had once nurtured his intellectual growth now felt stifling and oppressive. He found himself at odds with the bureaucratic nature of academia, the constant pressure to publish, and the competitive atmosphere. The more he immersed himself in this world, the more he felt like an outsider, disconnected from the very community he was supposed to be a part of. He felt alienated from the academic community and disturbed by what he saw as the negative impacts of technology. The rapid advancements in technology, which were celebrated by many, seemed to him a harbinger of doom. He was particularly concerned about the dehumanizing effects of technology, the way it seemed to strip away individuality and autonomy. These thoughts consumed him, leading to a growing sense of unease and dissatisfaction. He abruptly quit his teaching position at the University of California, Berkeley in 1969. This decision shocked his colleagues and students, who could not understand why someone with such a promising career would walk away from it all. But for Kaczynski, it was a necessary step, a way to escape the confines of a world that no longer made sense to him. It was a drastic move, but one that he felt was essential for his own sanity and well-being. This decision marked a turning point in Kaczynski's life. It was the beginning of a journey that would take him far away from the academic halls and into the depths of his own mind. He was no longer content to be a part of a system that he believed was fundamentally flawed. He sought something more, something that he could not find within the walls of a university. He severed ties with the academic world and sought refuge in the wilderness of Montana. The isolation of the forest offered him a sense of peace and clarity that he had never experienced before. It was a place where he could think, free from the distractions and pressures of modern life. He was drawn to the simplicity and self-sufficiency of a life lived close to nature. He built a small cabin near Lincoln, determined to live a self-sufficient life free from the trappings of modern society. The cabin was modest, but it was enough for his needs. He grew his own food, chopped his own wood, and lived a life of solitude. It was a stark contrast to the life he had left behind, but it was exactly what he wanted. He found solace in the routines of daily survival, in the quiet and stillness of the forest. Kaczynski's retreat to Montana was a physical manifestation of his growing alienation and his rejection of modern life. It was a deliberate choice, a way to distance himself from a world that he believed was on a path to destruction. In the isolation of his cabin, he had the space to reflect on his beliefs and to develop his ideas. But this isolation also had a darker side. As his thoughts turned increasingly radical and extreme, it was in this isolated environment that his radical ideology would fester and ultimately explode into violence. The solitude that he had sought as a refuge became a breeding ground for his anger and resentment. He began to see himself as a lone warrior, fighting against the forces of technological progress that he believed were destroying humanity. His writings became more and more extreme, and he started to formulate plans for a campaign of violence that would shock the world. Kaczynski's time in Montana was marked by increasing anger and resentment towards the technological progress he believed was destroying the natural world. Living in isolation, he became more and more convinced that the encroachment of technology was not just a minor inconvenience, but a profound threat to the very essence of human freedom and the environment. The serene yet rugged landscape of Montana, with its dense forests and remote wilderness, provided a stark contrast to the rapidly advancing technological world he so despised. It was here, amidst the tranquility of nature, that his thoughts began to darken, and his anger started to take a more defined shape. He viewed technology as a force that was enslaving humanity and eroding individual freedom. The rise of computers, the proliferation of factories, and the increasing dominance of urban environments over natural settings only served to deepen his conviction. To Kaczynski, every new technological advancement was another chain binding humanity, stripping away autonomy and individuality. The crowded urban landscapes, filled with people glued to their screens, seemed to him like a dystopian nightmare come to life. He saw a world where human connections were being replaced by digital interactions, and where the natural world was being sacrificed at the altar of progress. His frustration and anger festered, evolving into a dangerous ideology. Isolated in his cabin, Kaczynski's thoughts turned increasingly radical. He began to see himself not just as a critic of technology, but as a soldier in a war against it. His writings, filled with vitriol and despair, reflected a mind consumed by rage. The solitude of his remote existence only amplified his feelings of alienation and resentment. He was no longer just a man living off the grid. He was becoming a zealot, convinced that drastic action was necessary to halt the march of technological progress. Kaczynski concluded that violence was the only way to stop the advance of technology and what he saw as its corrupting influence on society. He immersed himself in anarchist literature, drawing inspiration from those who had used violence to make their voices heard. The political protests and dramatic acts of defiance he read about seemed to validate his belief that only through extreme measures could real change be achieved. He became convinced that peaceful protest was futile, and that the only way to truly make an impact was through acts of terror that would shock society into re-evaluating its path. He began to see himself as a warrior against the evils of modern civilization. In his mind, he was not just a lone dissenter, but a crusader on a righteous mission. The dense forests of Montana became his training ground, where he prepared himself mentally and physically for the battle he believed was inevitable. He studied military tactics, drawing parallels between his own struggle and those of historical figures who had fought against oppressive regimes. The image of a lone figure walking through the forest preparing for a fight became a powerful symbol of his resolve. Kaczynski meticulously studied bomb-making techniques, teaching himself how to construct deadly devices from readily available materials. His cabin, once a place of solitude and reflection, transformed into a workshop of destruction. He pored over manuals and guides, learning the intricacies of bomb construction with a scholar's dedication. Each device he built was a testament to his growing expertise and his unwavering commitment to his cause. The dimly lit room, filled with the tools of his deadly trade, became the birthplace of his campaign of terror. This meticulous planning and preparation underscored the chillingly calculated nature of his transformation from a reclusive scholar into a domestic terrorist. The detailed drawings and blueprints he created were not just plans for destruction, but symbols of his methodical approach. He was no longer just a man with a grudge. He was a calculated and deliberate architect of chaos. The cluttered desk, filled with papers and tools, was a stark reminder of the duality of his existence. A brilliant mind turned towards dark and destructive ends. His decision to resort to violence marked a chilling turning point. It was a moment of no return, a crossing of a boundary that would forever change his life and the lives of countless others. The dark, moody shots of him staring out the window captured the weight of his decision. He was no longer just contemplating action, he was committing to it. The symbolic footage of crossing a line underscored the gravity of his choice, a choice that would lead to a path of destruction and infamy. Kaczynski had crossed a line, embracing terrorism as a means to an end. The explosions he orchestrated were not just acts of violence, but messages to a society he believed was on the wrong path. Each act of terror was a statement, a declaration of war against the technological world he so despised. The police crime scene tape and the aftermath of his attacks were stark reminders of the real-world consequences of his actions. He had become a terrorist, willing to inflict pain and suffering to achieve his goals. His actions would have far-reaching consequences, leaving a trail of fear, destruction, and unanswered questions in their wake. The bomb aftermath scenes and archival news footage of the Unabomber case captured the widespread impact of his campaign of terror. Law enforcement officials in their interviews spoke of the fear and uncertainty that gripped the nation. Kaczynski's actions had not only caused physical destruction but had also sown seeds of doubt and fear. The unanswered questions about his motives and the extent of his plans added to the chilling legacy of his reign of terror.